Well, good morning. My name is Rocky Moretti. Moretti is spelled Moretti, and I'm the Director of Policy and Research for TRIP, a national nonprofit research organization based in Washington, D.C. For today's webinar, we'll ask that if you have any questions for any of the panelists, you can indicate there's a function on Zoom that you can indicate you have a question. And then my colleague, Carolyn Kelly, will after we are finished our comments, we'll invite you to be a panelist, and at that point you can ask your question and interact more normally with any of the three speakers today, and have your questions answered. And certainly TRIP has also put online or on our website individual comments for each of the four regions, which can also be accessed for any media coverage. TRIP now is entering its 50th year of operation as an organization that advocates for a well-maintained, safe, and reliable transportation system. Our role is to provide the latest data and information on the condition and performance and safety of that system. As an organization, we're supported by a coalition of manufacturing, insurance, construction, labor, and engineering organizations, and they support us in our role of educating the public with our reports on the condition of the system. Our new report, Missouri Transportation by the Numbers, is based on our analysis of the latest data from a variety of sources, including the Federal Highway Administration, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and the U.S. Department of Transportation. Now to the key findings of our report. The TRIP report estimates that the cost to Missouri drivers of driving on roads that are deficient, are congested, or in some cases lack desirable safety features is $8 billion annually. TRIP estimates that in the Kansas City area, the cost of deficient roads that are congested or perhaps lacking adequate safety features is $1,873. In the St. Louis area, the TRIP report estimates that the cost to the average motorist of roads that either have pavements in poor condition, providing a rough ride, that are congested, or maybe lacking desirable safety features is $1,917. These costs include the value of lost time and wasted fuel due to traffic congestion, the impact of driving on rough roads, which puts greater stress on vehicles and increases the need for routine maintenance, but also accelerates the depreciation of that vehicle, and finally, the economic cost of serious and fatal traffic crashes in which the lack of adequate roadway safety features was a contributing factor. The TRIP report includes calculations in all of these categories for the Columbia, Jefferson City area, the Kansas City areas, St. Louis, and also Springfield. More than half of Missouri's roads are currently in poor condition, with 25% rated in poor condition and 27% rated mediocre. Now, this is including locally maintained roads. These are all of the major roads in the state, essentially roads that people are driving on once they've left their neighborhoods. These are the major roads that state and local governments are responsible for maintaining, but obviously the challenge is having adequate resources to maintain roads in good condition. And we're also seeing across the country that while transportation agencies struggle with their current resources to repave those roads and keep them operable and smooth, that there becomes a point of diminishing returns where if older roads are not reconstructed when needed, that the ongoing repaving, their benefits start to diminish in time if you aren't able to actually do the more significant structural work that are needed as roadways get older. In the Kansas City area, the TRIP report finds that 27% of major roads are rated in poor condition and 25% are rated in mediocre condition. In the St. Louis area, the TRIP report finds that 24% of major roads have pavements in poor condition and 23% of pavements are in mediocre condition. The report also looked at bridge conditions in Missouri, and we note in the report that 9% of bridges in Missouri are rated structurally deficient. These are bridges that are in immediate need of repairs. The TRIP report also notes that prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, that we were seeing a steady increase in vehicle travel in Missouri, which since 2000 through 2018 had increased by 14%. Not surprisingly, during the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a significant reduction in travel, which it peaked in April when travel in Missouri was down by 38%. By September, travel was down 6% as the economy and vehicle travel rebounded. This is consistent with what we're seeing across the country. And it's likely that next year, as we finally work our way through this pandemic, that we'll see vehicle travel returning to pre-pandemic levels and really setting the stage for significant economic growth, which is also going to be accompanied by significant travel growth. TRIP estimates that in the Kansas City area, the traffic congestion annually is costing the average motorist an additional 47 hours stuck in traffic due to traffic congestion. In the St. Louis area, the TRIP report finds that the average motorist is spending an additional 46 hours annually stuck in traffic due to the high levels of traffic congestion. We also took a look at traffic safety, and here we note that unfortunately in Missouri, from 2014 to 2018, on average, 886 people were killed in traffic crashes. This includes motorists as well as bicyclists and pedestrians. The state's traffic fatality rate of 1.20 fatalities per 100 million miles of travel is higher than the national average. And we also note in the report that the traffic fatality rate on Missouri's non-interstate rural roads is approximately double on all other roads. We know from a variety of research that when cost-effective roadway safety features are put in place, everything from rumble strips to adding turn lanes at intersections to improving lighting where it's appropriate, to improving the safety of bicycle and pedestrian facilities, we see a significant savings of lives. In fact, the AAA Safety Foundation recently put out a report that's estimated that across the country, we could save 3,200 lives a year by just implementing cost-effective safety features. But obviously that takes additional funding. The report also points out the vital importance of freight transportation to the economy of Missouri. Every year, $469 billion of goods are being moved to and from locations in Missouri. So it gives you some sense how critical it is to the success of the region's economy. Obviously, Missouri's central location in the United States is a tremendous advantage, but you need to have in place the infrastructure to support that. The report also notes that the Federal Highway Administration anticipates by 2045 that the value of freight travel in Missouri is expected to increase by 81%. We also note that as the country and Missouri looks to restore its economy after the COVID-19 pandemic, that the ongoing investment in transportation is critical to job growth in Missouri. It currently supports approximately 79,000 jobs annually. And as the report also notes, that 1.3 million jobs in a variety of sectors of Missouri's economy are very much tied to the quality of its transportation system. Finally, in addition to the need for adequate state investment in the transportation system, the federal government is a significant source of funding in Missouri for highways and public transit. That bill or that program expires next September, and it's absolutely critical that the next Congress take this up and put in place a long-term, well-funded transportation bill. We're now going to hear from two speakers from Missouri that both have a significant knowledge of transportation challenges in the state. First, we'll be hearing from Ed Hassinger. Ed is the Deputy Director and Chief Engineer of the Missouri Department of Transportation. And then we'll hear from Len Tenges. Len is the President of the Associated General Contractors of Missouri and is also serving as the Chair of the Missouri Workforce Development Board. Ed?
Thanks, Rocky. And I think what we see in this report, it really confirms what we know here at MoDOT, that we just have not invested the necessary resources in transportation to keep our system in good shape, and likewise not making the improvements that are necessary to move us forward. That was also confirmed by the 21st Century Task Force that was put in place by the Missouri State Legislature. Their findings were very similar. And I think one of the things that really concerns us is, as Rocky mentioned, is that there is discussion about increased funding for transportation at the federal level. And here in Missouri, our funding levels are so low that we really have trouble matching currently the federal funds that we try to draw down to bring to Missouri. So any increases in federal funds for programs that we see on the horizon would really be hampered by our inability to match federal funds. With that in mind, our commission has asked that we go forward with the Missouri State Legislature to try to get them to put forward a 10-cent increase in the fuel tax over a 5-year period, a 2 cent a year type idea that would allow us not only to make improvements on our system, but also to have that ability to match any potential federal programs that would come down the line in the future. And I think that would be critical. The other thing that we're trying to get put into play in the legislature this year is to change our registration fee for vehicles from an antiquated horsepower model to one that really goes with miles per gallon. And that way it kind of blunts that idea that as cars get better gas mileage, we lose revenue. That's kind of an idea to replace that revenue as the fleet gets better and better gas mileage and we see the onslaught of electric vehicles. Currently in Missouri, we have a list of $825 million a year in needs that are unmet. And these aren't wants, these are needs. These are things like safety improvements, bridge replacements, those critical interchanges in our urban areas that reduce congestion and develop economic opportunities. And so that's our unfunded, unmet need that we can't fund today. And so that's important that we are able to do that to move us forward. In Missouri, we sit here in the middle of the country. We have some of the most connected parts of the country as it relates to roads, rails, and rivers. But if we don't make the investment to do those things that make those things work and bring economic activity to this state, we've really lost an opportunity, I think. And as we go forward, there's a cost to investing, and that's a hard decision to make for our policymakers. But there's also a cost to not investing. And I think in this report, it's very clearly spelled out. What is the cost of doing nothing? It's really shows up in the cost of operating your vehicle. It shows in lost economic opportunity. It shows in sitting in congestion. And most importantly, it really shows up in people not being safe on the roadways. So all of those things are reasons to do the hard decision making that it takes to make the investment in our transportation system. So I would just say thanks to Tripp and Rocky and your team for highlighting this. I think it really goes along with a lot of the other reports and the stuff that MoDOT's been doing to reinforce this point. And it's really time for us to make those hard decisions and figure out how we're going to invest in the transportation system that we all need and want here in Missouri.
Len?
Thank you, Rocky and Ed. I'm Len Tenges. I'm the president of AGC of Missouri, Associate General Contractors. We represent over 500 private construction firms across the state of Missouri. It's important, I think, now that we understand what sort of condition that Missouri's roads and bridges are in. I guess the question is why? And we have to look at this, I think, in conjunction with another report from another foundation, not Tripp, but from the Reason Foundation. The Reason Foundation on November 19th released their 25th annual highway report, and it ranked the cost effectiveness of the various departments of transportation. Missouri Department of Transportation ranked number 2, the second most efficient DOT in the United States, second only to North Dakota. That's really impressive. What does that mean as far as the why? It means that MoDOT has been doing an excellent job and really a first-rate job of being super efficient stewards of the funds that they are provided by the taxpayers and by the legislature. They're out there patching and repairing across the state. As Ed said, there's $875 million of unmet needs. All they're doing is patching and repairing, not building, not replacing, not creating a viable highway system for today and for tomorrow of where the state needs to go. The why is that Missouri and MoDOT has inadequate resources. It's got nothing to do with efficiency. It's about the available resources. The responsibility lies with the Missouri State Legislature. The state leaders and the elected officials have to find a way to create a sustainable funding source for the state's transportation system now, during this next session. Otherwise, the cost for every driver is going to continue to rise. The cost that Rocky talked about that each driver is paying on repairs, maintenance, time and congestion, and all those delays that folks experience every day. There are other costs that are hidden costs. Missouri lies in the middle of the United States. As Ed said, we're at the crossroads for logistics. And as long as the roads are inadequate for today or tomorrow's needs, the economy is not going to stop. It's going to go around us. It's going to go somewhere else. It happened it happened early in the 19th century or the 20th century when folks did not invest in bridges and all the transit went to Chicago. We're at that critical point again when if we don't react as a state, we're going to lose for the long term. We certainly are hopeful that the new Congress is going to act and make a major national infrastructure bill. And as Ed stated, the Missouri legislature needs to react now to be able to provide that opportunity that we can take full advantage of whatever is available. The time is now for our statewide leaders to act to make sure that that transportation funding is there to help us solve the problems we have and prepare for the future. If we don't have action again this year, I'm really concerned that we're going to continue as a state to fall further and further behind. It's going to continue to cost taxpayers more dollars. The economy will go around us and we will really hurt ourselves. It's important that we encourage our legislative leaders to act now, and help us solve this problem that is very apparent and very factual. So Rocky, thank you for your information, and Ed, thank you for the wonderful efficiency that MoDOT does with the funds they have. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you. And now we'll give everyone a minute or two to invite you to ask any questions, and you'll be brought on as panelists, and you can direct those questions to whichever the speakers you choose. Carolyn?
And as Rocky noted, you'll be either able to use the raise hand function at the bottom of the screen to raise your hand to indicate that you'd like to ask a question, or you can also submit a question in writing via the Q&A box that's also located at the bottom of your screen. We'll give a minute for any questions to come in. Once you do submit a question, I'll be able to recognize the person who's asked the question. You'll be temporarily elevated to a speaker, and so we'll be able to see and hear you as you ask your question. So we do ask that you unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you're comfortable or able. So as Rocky said, we'll give it a moment or two for any questions to come in. And in the meantime, while we wait for that, I'll also note that the recording of this news conference will be available on the TRIP website within about a half an hour of our conclusion. And also on the TRIP website, you'll be able to find video clips for each of the 4 urban areas for which we have data in the report that have a clip of Rocky providing a video synopsis of the data for each of those urban areas. So there are additional opportunities to get footage not only of the news conference today, but also of some additional interview footage with Rocky. At this point, I don't see any questions that have come in or any hands that are raised. So Well, again, we'll give that another moment. Or if there are any other concluding remarks that any of their speakers would like to make, you can feel free to do that. Oh, I do
Well,
see,
just to point it, okay, good.
I see a question from Philip Sitter. So Philip, I will allow you to be a panelist. I'll allow you to speak. And it looks like you're muted now, but if you unmute yourself, you'll be able to go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, I'm with the News Tribune in Jefferson City. And this is for, I think, anyone really, but we know the budget situation in the state is tight right now with COVID. I would imagine that improves somewhat over the next few months, but obviously there's still a lot of uncertainty. What's kind of your general hope in the next few months or maybe a year from now going forward? You know, what do you think the appetite is for a lot of infrastructure spending? Where do you think could maybe more federal resources help? What's kind of your hope for the immediate future?
Why don't I take it first and then I'll throw it to Ed. You know, when we're talking about the COVID spending and the things that are there, that is certainly out of the general revenue and out of a totally different pool of funds than support the Department of Transportation. Department of Transportation is funded by fuel taxes and by registration fees. Those funds are walled off and dedicated only for the use of MoDOT. And there has been some general revenue that is already being spent to deal with some of the shortfall. The governor last year and over the last couple of years has dedicated some funds there. As far as the appetite of the public for increasing funding, I think this is quite frankly a case of, do I want to continue to fix my car and spend my money fixing my car and waste my time sitting in traffic? Or do I want to take those same dollars and dedicate them to a better system that's going to reduce my car repairs and reduce my time in traffic and help make me more efficient and bring more jobs into the state and create more employment? I look at it as an investment, not as an expense.
Yeah, and Philip, I would just add to that. I think, you know, transportation is really a long-term game. We certainly are dealing with the issues related to COVID in the short term. You know, but our contractors across the state and MoDOT's team, it is one of the areas that we have been able to continue doing what we do because it is naturally socially distanced. The short-term issue that we're dealing with is people are driving less, and that's something we're concerned about on the gas tax revenue side, and at the federal level, that is also happening. But I think if we take the long view, you know, we still are going to have those needs to move freight in this country. We're still going to have those safety concerns on our roadways. And so I think the investment that's needed, it was not where it should have been before COVID. Certainly COVID has put some definite short-term challenges in front of us that we've been able to meet, I think. But we are looking long-term, what are those effects? Will it change people's driving habits? Will it, you know, have impacts on commerce and the economy? But I think transportation is also one of those places that if you make the investment, the results are pretty quick. And MoDOT is an organization, along with the people that work with us to do that, and Lynn's Industry and others, that can deliver on that. And we stand ready to do that. And I think just, you know, evidence of that is the governor's bridge plan that he put forward less than a year ago. The legislature and the governor put forward money to replace bridges. And here we are less than a year later, and we've already got 100 of those bridges open to traffic almost. We're at 86, I think, today. So I think the investment, you can see the immediate benefits of it. And that's why I think it's so important that we're talking at the federal level and the state level about continuous, long-term, dependable revenue that we can count on, so we can make those decisions to do the things that really matter to the economy and to safety and to road condition.
And I would just add that this is consistent with what we're seeing across the country, these types of discussions. TRIP will be releasing reports in the next 2 weeks in New York, Maine, and North Carolina, and a number of states early next year. And it really reflects, I think, at the state level, a really sober assessment of moving forward as we start to see the ability to work our way out of this pandemic next year. And really that's going to impact, economic recovery is front and center, and transportation investment can be very critical as part of that. But then beyond that, I think it's what the deputy director alluded to. It's concerns over funding sustainability as fuel efficiency in vehicles increases, as we move increasingly to electric vehicles, and then just the need to have in place a well-maintained, reliable, safe transportation system. So it appears that almost every state is going to be having significant discussions of the transportation system over the next several months and into next year's legislative season.
Okay, thank you for that. It looks like the next question comes from Michael Calhoun. Michael, I've added you as a panelist, and if you unmute yourself, you'll be able to ask your question. Go ahead. Go ahead, Michael. Michael is muted, but I will go ahead and just read the question that he had submitted, which is there an appreciable difference in condition between city and county roads in the St. Louis metro area and those that are state maintained?
Yeah, go ahead, Ed.
I think we deal a lot with cities and counties across the state. And I think really a lot of them are all in the same boat. There's been an underinvestment that the state gas tax, 30% of that goes to cities and counties. And so, they're dealing with the same revenue issues that we are. And I think you can see that across the state. So I don't know if there's probably places that are different, but overall the picture is the same. Underinvestment in transportation, systems that are deteriorating. And I don't know that you can really make an individual distinction, but overall, I think it's pretty consistent across the state.
And I think also there's been the matching program that MoDOT has for some municipalities or some folks to be able to tap into a 50-50 match fund. And I know that had to be suspended for a certain amount of time because there were not enough dollars available to allow, if there was some work that needed to be done in St. Louis City or St. Louis County, that there was a pool that they could dip into for a 50-50 match. Those dollars went away for a while because of the lack of sufficient funding. I don't know if that program's been reinstated or not, but I think that was a piece that allows for some of that to happen.
Yeah, I think all those programs are challenged. We suspended our cost share program for a while. We've brought it back. But I think the key point is that for us, we're going to use every dime that we can to make sure we match all the federal funds, because that's a 4-to-1, leverage that you just can't let go. And that's why we're so concerned about if there is some federal action to do something bigger than currently, we might be in a really bad spot. And that's just something we're watching very closely.
And Ed, I think that also points back to the efficiency that was named in that reason report. I know that Director McKenna and the team there has done an absolutely tremendous job of really looking through every expense that the State Department has and see what is available for the federal match and using every opportunity they have to leverage those dollars.
Yeah, when you have the 45th lowest revenue per mile in the country, we have to do everything that we possibly can to leverage and to find and to compete for funds. And, our condition is not where we want it to be, but we're not the 45th worst in the country. And I think that's a testament to not only the MoDOT team, but also to the contracting industry and our consulting industry that really does a great job of doing the work. We focus on doing the work. And getting the biggest bang for the buck we can on every dollar we spend. So, but that's not an excuse to say we're okay. You know, we do that, and we would do that no matter what. But we can't cut our way to better roads. We've got to have the investment to make our roads better in condition, safer. And I think the economic development component that really is important is if we don't make those improvements to draw the economy to the state of Missouri, we're going to be sitting here wondering why everybody went to, you know, Iowa or Illinois or somewhere else. So important things on the horizon.
Okay, our next question comes from Jay Hickman. I've elevated you to a presenter, so if you mute your microphone, you'll be able to ask your question live.
If you unmute, yeah, thank you.
Go right ahead.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes?
Yep.
If the registration fee situation and the 10-cent gas tax is something that doesn't come through, are there any other areas y'all can look at as far as possible revenue sources? And obviously, the governor with the bridge situation has helped, and I'm sure there will be some legislators say, hey, we've already provided you with money to help on bridges. So what would your answer be to them as well?
Well, I think there's a lot of options, but I think, you know, most of them have been tried. We've gone, there's been a vote of the people on different options of sales tax and a gas tax. You know, the fact remains that we have a declining revenue source. As cars get better gas mileage over time, our revenue is going to decline. We have a system that the condition is deteriorating. So if we're not successful in getting more revenue, you know, we're not the public policy makers at MoDOT. We're the get the job done folks with the money that we have. And so what we'll be doing is we'll be managing the decline of the system to the best ability we can if we don't do something on the revenue front.
Let me take a run at that question too, Ed. There are any number of revenue streams, as Ed mentioned, to understand whether the citizens want to use toll roads, to understand whether they want to use a sales tax, to understand whether they want to use there are any number of different revenue sources that are available, and the legislature can make any of those choices, and they're in a position of they're elected to make those choices. The question was asked earlier about what the appetite of the traveling public may be. That's the unknown question. That is literally the $100 million question. I mean, as Ed said, 86 bridges were fixed this year. So I would say to the folks who say, well, you know, we gave you money last year. Well, we fixed 86 bridges, and out of hundreds or that still are out there needing repair, that we put a Band-Aid on an open wound, basically, and made some improvements and fixed what was critical. But as the TRIP report shows, there's still a large number of bridges that need to be repaired or replaced. There's still a large number of work that needs to be done, whether it's the farm to market bridges, whether it's in the urban areas to fix congestion. We took a small part of the disease and cured it, but there's still a lot of work to do that's still out there. So I guess I'd say thank you to them for giving us a little bit to keep us maybe kind of alive. But did we cure the patient? No.
Okay, I see what I believe will be our last question, unless there are others that come up. And this comes from the Missouri Chamber of Commerce. So I've added you as a panelist. If you go ahead and unmute your line, you'll be able to ask your question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Rocky. Thanks for your work. This is Dan Meehan from the Missouri Chamber of Commerce. And first of all, congratulations to Ed and Patrick, the department, for that fantastic rating of efficiency. My question would be to Rock, I guess. Rock, can you talk about states, South Carolina, and maybe us that improvements to that have increased their fund for transportation bridges, and any metric how they've been since they did that? I South Carolina in 17. How have on any metric like the you've listed that Missouri just with your?
Well, to talk about two good examples, particularly in the area of bridges. Oklahoma and Pennsylvania were sort of poster child for some of the worst bridges in the country, and certainly numerically. In Pennsylvania, it was a pretty significant funding package in 2013 that really started to turn the corner. In Oklahoma, it was really more a steady set of legislative steps that made transportation investment a greater priority. And then the states were quite innovative. They would go ahead and put a group of projects into a bundle to increase the efficiency, really, I suppose, of letting those projects. And perhaps Ed can address that. He has a lot of greater knowledge in that area. But what we've seen is tremendous improvement. And notwithstanding, both states continue to see economic growth and vehicle travel growth. But they really, I think, did a very good job at communicating those needs to the public, and the legislature has seen the importance of that. So, we've seen that once states really focus on their long-term transportation challenges and then commit to addressing it over a number of years, that we'll see significant improvements.
Dan, I did hear you mention the South Carolina model, and I'm familiar with that. I know that they took a very creative approach to, in a similar situation, to phase in. Ed had mentioned the 2 cents a year for 5 years. I know that South Carolina adopted a model somewhat similar to that, but did allow a proviso for people who wanted to save their receipts and request a refund of those. I think that's the model that they have used. And my understanding is that once folks realize that the increase of that 2 cents a year is such a small amount, that it's really, when you look at it on a per person or a per driver platform, you're looking at maybe $25 or maybe even less per the average driver, that folks look at it and go, well, this has been much ado about nothing. This really makes sense that we do go ahead and move forward with this. It's a high percentage of folks, when they look at it at the end of the year, say, that's a smart thing to do, to invest this money in the DOT. That's a South Carolina model. I know some folks are looking at it. Maybe that's a path forward. That's up to the legislature. And I think the message is, I just hope the legislature does express some leadership and move forward during this next session.
Couldn't agree more. We will be polling on issue and others surrounding transportation funding in early January. Thank you.
And that is all of the questions that I see.
Okay, well, we'll conclude the press event. I know certainly Trip is available throughout the day for additional interviews one-on-one. And I want to thank the Deputy Director and also Len Tenges for taking the time to join us today. That concludes our press conference. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Rocky. All right.